Hello, everybody, and I know that I'm standing between you and lunch, so I'll be brief. What I want to do today is to give you the perspective of the small guy. We had the larger company sitting here and talking about the perspective of India and the US interactions from the perspective of the larger companies. But I want to give you the perspective from the viewpoint of a startup, right? And so what are my credentials for doing that? I've been working with startups in the space of marketing analytics for the last 4 years. And I've been scientific advisors for 3 such companies. And 2 of them are actually startups started by Indian expats here with operations back in India. Now, one of them, unfortunately, is not in existence anymore. But I did learn I have a lot of experience as to why it failed, and what are the reasons as to why we are having a situation where there are opportunities, but there are also lots of challenges. So I just want to run through a few slides to set the stage for why marketing analytics and why startups in the area of marketing analytics. So if you look at marketing analytics, there is tremendous growth opportunity in terms of the size of the market, and I will talk a little bit about it, and also for startups. And you will find that many of these applications that come up in the marketing analytics area are going to be fueled by smaller startups who have very innovative ideas, and they are going to be eaten up or acquired by larger companies as the experience shows. So I'm going to also compare Indian IT revolution with the analytics revolution that's going on, and that has some special challenges for startups that are based here as well as in India. And then I'll also conclude with this future scenario as to what's going to happen. So the new marketplace, as we talk about, we already know that emerging digital, and again, the panel talked about it, there is a lot of innovations going on in that space. We have print, radio, TV, social media, and digital versions of all the above, and proliferating sales channel and devices. And some of the exciting things that are happening are, on the last line there, mobile, smartphone, tablets, smart watches, virtual reality. All right? And this is the space that I'm talking about where startups are contributing in a very significant way. And again, we have finally the era of big data and Internet of Things, and I expect those areas to also feel a lot of startup activity very soon, if not already. Now, there are some details about why big data is going to make a big difference. McKinsey's report in 2014 talks about it. And if you look at the application methods that they talk about, applications and methods are the basic area where you will find a lot of activity. And that's where the startups will start making a lot of contribution. And if you were to look at marketing analytics, and all the technology revolution that has taken place till today, you will see that this is actually the era of the CMOs, right? The CEO era has passed, the CMO era has come. But if you were to really make a comparison and say, well, things are going to be the same as what happened in the CIO era, you'll be mistaken. And I will tell you why that's not so. So these are some of the growth opportunities that we have. In terms of, this is an IDC report that came out in November 2015. So they talk about big data technology and services market growing to about 50 billion by 2019. And this includes infrastructure, software, and services. And if you look at software and services, that includes marketing analytics software, which is about 2 billion, CRM analytics, about 7, mobile analytics. And if you look at the applications, social media marketing, email marketing, SEO marketing, pay-per-click marketing, display, video, content marketing, and so on. Now, of course, this has caught the eye of a lot of Indian companies in India trying to make a play for the US market. And in fact, I was there last year at a NASSCOM conference that was held at Hyderabad, where they were focusing on big data and analytics and looking to see what was the role that Indian companies could play in this space, right? And if you look at the startup opportunity itself, I'm looking at US now. There are 323 marketing tech. So I'm looking at this particular area of marketing technology, right? And there were about 323 marketing technology startups, which got about $11 billion from VCs in 2015, right? And there are a total of about 5,000 startups in this marketing technology space in the US. Now, towards the end of 2015, the ad technology sector started taking a beat. So the investment in those technology has really tapered off very fast. But if you were to look at the other areas, you find that there is a tremendous interest from venture capitals in all these different areas. All right? Now, where exactly does US and India startups come into play? So these are some of the models. So the startup is in the US, started by typically Indian expats, serving the US market, and then they have India back office operations, right? And of course, this was not started by these startups, but you had companies like syndicated market research firms like Comscore, IRI, already doing some of the work back in India because they had qualified people who could do a lot of analysis for the service work they were doing in the US. So this is one example. And then there are some interesting startups which have done really well in this sector, which is Mu Sigma, which is also started by some Indian startups, Chicago-based. Visual IQ is another company which was started. They have back office operations in Cochin. And you find that this is a very popular model which people have adopted because there is a lot of technical support that they can derive from India and look at the markets in the US, which are much more advanced as compared to the Indian market. Now, the second startup model is Indian firms and startups, which are typically started by Indian Americans going back to India and starting these companies and focusing purely on the Indian market, right? Now, a good example is this company called Hansa Sequity, which does CRM type of work with large Indian companies, packaged good companies, Hindustan Lever, P&G, and so on. And then, the two other people who actually started this company are from here, went back and started this, and they are focused purely on the Indian market. And then you have Indian firms and startups which are looking at both the US market as well as the Indian market. All right? Now, this is the typical IT industry model where the IT industry really started working with Indian companies and then started coming up here. So what is the situation analysis? So as I said, startups typically are started by Indian expats in the US, back office operations in India, building and scaling the business, and that is a very costly proposition. Cost of setting up these startups are very easy, low barriers to entry, and so there is a intense competition for these companies. And some of the early startups were acquired by US companies. Google and Adobe have acquired many of those companies, startups started by the Indian expats. And many of the startups now, which are still in play, are about in the 100 million sales level, and they are kind of stagnating at that level. And I'll tell you why we have some problems there. Now, if you were to compare this with how the IT revolution took place, Indian IT revolution took place in the US, the IT industry was looking at very mission-critical applications, right? And the budget for these IT services were coming from the operational budget of companies. So what the companies used to do is to come in here, have a foot in the door, and then start growing, so started looking at how can I increase it to 5-fold, 10-fold, 20-fold over time. And if you look at their business models, it was, repeat business was a big thing. 90% of their business in the growth came from repeat business with the same company that they were working with. And 10% of them came from new acquisitions, right? And of course, they had, they still have very good homegrown talent who had experience working with Indian companies, and so this easily was transportable to the US market and aided by the fact that you have very clear standards and specifications with which you need to do this work, right? So the result was there was a tremendous growth for the Indian IT revolution. Now, if you were to compare that with the marketing analytics revolution that is taking place now, there is a big difference. And the difference is because marketing analytics is still now seen as a discretionary spending by US companies, right? I've made a lot of business development visits with some of my startups, going and meeting with some of these companies, and what it really comes across is that it is not needed at this point. This is something that they will look into, but they could probably do without it at this particular point, and so they are a little gun-shy in committing. And also, there is no easy standards or procedures. Typically, marketing companies, CMOs, have tough time understanding what is the quality of the service or the application or the product that they're going to get, because there is no clear standards and specification like you have in IT services, and these applications tend to be very new across different kinds of silos, right? So US companies are more in the R&D mode at this point with respect to marketing analytics. And then the sales cycle is fairly long, 3 to 6 months. All right, you have to make visits and try to close it. The closing doesn't happen. If it does happen, it takes quite a while. And this is not just true for just the Indian startups, but it's true of any marketing analytics startup that's in this space. And another issue is selling custom service rather than modularized productized version of service. And one of the reasons as to why we find many of these companies are stagnating at the 100 million level is they are very service-oriented. That means they start a project on CRM, they allow to put a lot of people, they allow to hire people back in India and some here in order to maintain that account. And then they get another account in the CRM, but it is customized, so they really cannot take this and transport it and get and learn from this and apply it there. And so it actually doesn't scale up very nicely, right? And the other issue is about marketing analytics talent in India. Now, this is something that I've had personal experience with. Now, there is great talent in India in terms of data architecture and system development, but there are a few that are in the running, and there's a lot of competition for these few guys. You can easily acquire some of these people, but if they feel that the work is not very exciting, they leave, right? And so the very critical piece of people that you need back in India to help you build products, marketing analytics products, is difficult to find. And also, the talent there is not about product development mindset. It's more of a service mindset, so if you want to really develop products that can be modularized and sold and scaled up, it's not all that easy. And another thing that I found was about marketing expertise. The marketing domain expertise is available here, but people back in India who are working on these systems really don't have this marketing domain expertise, right? And so much so that people from US have to be hired and sent back to India in order to work with that team so that the team knows exactly how this application is going to be used. All right, so many of these companies that I talked about have this problem because once they start growing and they come to about 100 million and they want to hire more people back in India, they really can't do it because there are no more really good people that they can find help with. And thought leadership is also lacking, especially in the area of marketing analytics. Customer acquisition, customers are in the R&D mode, like I talked about, compared with like an ERP system or something where repeat businesses abound. In marketing analytics, generally it becomes a one-shot deal, right? So you get a project, you work with the project, And after you finish the project, you want to upsell and cross-sell, the opportunity is not there, and they are looking at, well, we'll come back to you later. So the customer lifetime value compared to the IT industry and the IT customer is much lower in the marketing analytics space, right? So just to touch upon, one of the companies that I worked with failed due to lack of funding, and of course the problem was that we were working on an application which was a little ahead of time, and it was tough to convince the marketing CMOs to really adopt it, and they will be the first few to adopt. And so I think by the time we had 30 people back in Hyderabad working on this, and so we had to pull the plug just last October, right? And there are the other companies which are working, but they have been more successful in trying to get, they are not profitable, they are successful in getting orders, but again, they are limping along. But what we actually found was that in the marketing analytics space, since the applications tend to be very, very different, if you already have a foot in the door, a big company like Google really can expand their footprint in different applications very fast. So they acquired companies like Adometry, which was a startup, and then they actually go and acquire lots and lots of different companies which can provide, and as a result, Google can go in and provide a suite of different applications which a startup cannot. The startup tends to work in a particular silo, right? But I don't think everything is bad, because the future looks pretty good. And why I say that is this. Rise of master's program in marketing analytics and business analytics and computer science, AI. So there are lots of Indian students coming from India, getting educated in our school and other schools. And so the idea is that even if 10 to 20% of them go back to India, you will certainly have a large set of students who are well-versed with the techniques, and even working for 2-3 years here and going back. So you will certainly have this talent pool increasing over time. And as analytic products become much more mainstream down the road, I'm looking at next 3 to 5 years, it's going to get into a sweet spot where I think many of these applications will become very, very commonplace. And as a result of that, I think with increasing talent back in India, you can have different kinds of models possible. Now, the e-commerce in India right now, startups like Flipkart and others are in the mode where many of the American companies were. Hear from VCs that there's a lot of investment going on in these startups, and the startups are spending money like crazy. They are not making any profit, but they are going for market share, and so that's what happened here too. And so pretty soon, they will need analytics services. And in fact, some studies have shown that the support services will be needed in 25 different categories, where these companies, these e-commerce companies, once they become established in India, they will start needing all these analytics. So, certainly the model number 2 will benefit, okay, which means we will have more of Indian companies looking at Indian markets with talent brought back to India. And it could also help Model 3, because I believe that innovations in the Indian market context are going to increase. I have personal, I have a nephew who was from MIT, who worked for Bain for 2 years, went back to Mumbai and started a startup. Very confident about, being successful there. And I asked him, so why did you leave? And he said, well, the next generation of innovations in technology is going to come from India, and he has a terrific team that he's working with, and he's looking at the social space. Now, the social space is going to be a terrific opportunity for Indian companies, because the penetration of social media in India has become tremendous. It's very high, and it has bypassed the usual common forms of communication as to how companies use in order to communicate with customers. So social is going to be a big innovator in India, and I think we're going to find more of those innovations coming here and being used and transported to the US. So finally, I just want to touch upon, the thought leadership Thought leadership is on the right with exchange programs that are going on. As an academic, I can talk about a lot of interactions that we have with Indian business schools. With the new innovations and methods using cognitive computing and deep learning, and I think there's a pool of expats in Silicon Valley who are creating something interesting. In fact, if you go and go to this Indian Startups USA website, you will find there is a lot of activity going on. People are trying to meet up and figure out what kind of startups can be done, which can benefit markets here as well as in India. All right? So that's about what I have to say. And if you have any questions, I can take it. Otherwise, we'll go have lunch.
You made a comment about
Thought leadership.
Okay.
Thought
well,
leadership.
marketing domain expertise was the phrase you used,
Okay.
so I'll
Okay.
bring that up back to you. So I guess my question is, there are many leading Indian business schools, and there are lots of large U.S. and other multinationals that have been doing business in India for a while. So, to my mind, that is a pool of talent for marketing domain expertise. Do you find them not getting engaged with
Yeah.
the tech community?
So, typically what happens is in the startups, the people that we tend to attract are the ones that have graduated from schools and willing to engage. Now, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but in India, if people are already, in a well-known company, there isn't much of an incentive for them to leave that job and come to startups. And that is why I said where in the startup area, you really don't have much talent. Certainly, I wouldn't put down Indian companies. I worked for some Indian companies in Tata's, for example. So talent is there. But the idea here is marketing analytics, talent, understanding how the applications are done, and trying to bring it in product development. So that's the kind of talent that's lacking. Yes.
So you talked about people studying here, like in business analytics and all, and going back to India to research market and doing a startup. But in terms of like social and cultural landscape, India is totally different from the US. Mm-hmm. So can you give an example of people going from here and adapting to Indian market and like applying their skills there?
Yeah, that's a good question. The company that I work for, a scientific advisor. I work for Smith School. The dean is here. So that company, essentially, they had two people who had come back, all right, for different reasons. One was wanted to be back in Hyderabad and be with family, so they were working in that company, and they were very good. They were working here for a couple of years or 3 years, and then they moved back. And so what I'm saying is I don't think all of the Indian students are going to move back, but there will be a sizable number. And they will. I also have a cousin who was working for Yahoo. He moved and became a vice president for supply chain in Flipkart. And so, he was here for a long time, and he thought that this was the right time to move, and he moved. And so what I'm saying is I'm looking at anecdotes, and I can see that there is a lot of interest in moving back and, working with startups. And I think at a particular point in time, and the point at which you will make the decision will be different for different people, but I'm pretty sure you will find a lot of people going back and getting involved in startups and other Indian companies.